The moment you begin explaining your boundaries to someone who constantly oversteps them, something very subtle happens. You think you're being mature, calm, and reasonable. In reality, you are inadvertently revealing exactly how much disrespect you are willing to tolerate. Toxic individuals don't misunderstand your boundaries. They are measuring them. They are counting how many times you'll repeat a warning, calculating the cost of ignoring you. And if that cost is too cheap, they will cross the line again. Disrespect is rarely an impulsive lapse or an emotional outburst. It is a strategic test. A smirk, an interruption, or a sarcastic joke in front of a crowd isn't just a mistake. It's a way of probing, gathering data, and asking a silent question. How far can I go with this person? Your reaction becomes the definitive answer. Stoicism offers a truth that is both brutal and liberating. You are responsible for your own character, but you have no obligation to convince others to recognize it. If you're tired of pretending to be strong and want to truly master your inner world, welcome to Stoic Journey. If these reflections resonate with you, please subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts below as a commitment to the calm, self-governing version of yourself that you are building. How many times after a confrontation have you agonized over whether you should have explained yourself more clearly? The truth is, the problem was never the explanation. It was your expectation. The moment you stop negotiating your dignity, true power immediately returns to you. You'll then realize something vital. The most powerful way to neutralize a toxic person isn't to argue with them, but to completely change your position in the game. A silent mental shift that turns their every attack into a trap of their own making. 1. The brutal truth about boundaries and disrespect. There is a deep-seated, misguided belief that every rift can be mended through honest dialogue. We sit down, carefully articulating our boundaries, hoping for understanding in return. But the cold, hard truth is that for a toxic mind, your heartfelt explanation isn't seen as goodwill. It's a detailed report on your level of concession. When a colleague blatantly cuts you off in a meeting, or an acquaintance strikes a nerve at the dinner table, it is rarely a moment of mindlessness. Don't be fooled into thinking they didn't realize they crossed the line. In reality, they are silently measuring exactly how much you will endure. At its core, disrespect is a test. Every overstep is a probe, a silent question. How will this person react if I go one step further? Our greatest mistake is giving them the answer too quickly. When you fire back in anger, they know you've been lured into their emotional trap. When you bow your head and endure it, they see that you fear conflict more than you value your self-respect. Even when you try to explain calmly, they may only see someone begging for kindness through their approval. This need to be understood becomes the very leverage they use to push your boundaries even further. The more you justify, the more your boundaries lose their weight, shifting from a principle to a negotiation. The core lesson here is a radical shift in mindset. Respect is not earned through pleading or better explanations. To protect yourself, you must close the door on negotiation. When you stop providing predictable reactions, others lose their tools of control. You don't need a sharper argument to win a meaningless confrontation. What you need is an internal shift, moving from the role of someone waiting to be treated right to the person who decides their own worth. From that moment, a vital question emerges. How do you neutralize toxicity? Not with arguments, but with a silence powerful enough to flip the entire board. 2. Shifting states, from victim to observer. The secret to breaking this cycle begins with a quiet but decisive shift in perception. Stop standing before others like a student waiting to be graded and step into the position of the observer. In toxic encounters, we often get trapped in the need to prove ourselves, wanting the other person to acknowledge that we are right, kind, or worthy of respect. But the second you rush to defend yourself, you've stepped onto their stage. Think of a meeting where a colleague dismisses your efforts as irresponsible or too sensitive. If you immediately list your sleepless nights, you are no longer defending the truth. You are begging for recognition within the very frame of judgment they built. The transformation begins when you stop asking, "Why are they treating me like this?" and replace it with a colder, clearer question. What are they trying to take from me right now? It might be attention. It might be a sense of superiority. It might be an emotional reaction to confirm they still have power over you. The moment that question arises, the temperature in your mind begins to drop. You are no longer the one being attacked. You are stepping back to see the anatomy of the strike. This is the art of detached awareness. It's not about being cold or avoidant. It's the ability to see things exactly as they are. Like a scientist observing a chemical reaction in a test tube, they don't take the fizzing as a personal attack. They observe the pattern and note the signals. You must do the same. When a sarcastic comment is thrown your way, don't concede, but don't charge into battle either. Simply observe and ask, is this sound truly worthy of entering my inner world? This stillness strips the provocateur of what they need most, the power to define your emotional state. In this state of observation, your strongest weapon isn't a biting comeback, it's the unadorned truth. Manipulators live by labels: selfish, dramatic, useless. They want to drag you into a war over those words, so you'll waste energy proving you aren't what they claim. Never put your honor on the operating table of their adjectives. If someone accuses you of contributing nothing, a short, dry, factual response like, "I finished the report and placed it on the desk," is enough. No further explanation, no defense, no counterattack. The war ends the moment it runs out of emotional oxygen. When you pull the wood from the fire, the flame of conflict dies out. But don't mistake this quiet for final victory. Toxicity does not surrender control easily. Once they realize your usual emotional triggers no longer work, they will try a harder, sharper, more sophisticated strike. That is the true test of consistency, the moment that decides whether you have truly escaped the victim role or if you're just standing still before returning to the start. 3. Overcoming the extinction burst, the ultimate test of fortitude. Your silence will not bring immediate peace. On the contrary, the moment a manipulator realizes their usual emotional buttons no longer work, they will likely escalate. In psychology, this phenomenon is known as an extinction burst, the moment an old behavior becomes more intense right before it ceases to function. It's like a person standing before an unlit elevator button. They press it once, then twice, then start hammering it violently, as if sheer force could make the machine work again. Human beings operate under the same mechanism. When your stillness cuts off the energy they once exploited, they rarely back down immediately. Instead, they increase the pressure. An acquaintance might suddenly bring up your past mistakes in front of a crowd. A colleague might start spreading malicious rumors behind your back. The tone becomes sharper. The attacks get personal. And the psychological pressure grows heavy enough that your nervous system wants only one thing: to react and get it over with. You'll want to explain. You'll want to fire back. You'll want to do anything to end the chaos as quickly as possible. But right there, that exact moment is the most dangerous trap. If you concede during this escalation phase, you haven't solved the problem. You have simply restored the entire toxic cycle and taught them a very clear lesson. If they apply enough pressure, if they push far enough, if they wear you down, they will regain control. Therefore, the most important thing to understand is this: Escalation is not evidence that your calm has failed. On the contrary, it is usually the clearest sign that the old system of manipulation is beginning to collapse. To pass through this stage, you don't need to become more aggressive. You simply need to become firmer. Keep interactions to a bare minimum. Stick only to the facts. Answer only what is necessary. Do not argue with interpretations. Do not fight back with emotions. And do not let your mind be pulled into the vortex created by others. Stoicism has long reminded us of this quality. True strength lies not in striking back at every blow, but in the ability to remain undeformed by them. When you stand firm through the extinction burst, you don't just disarm your opponent, you sever an old reflex within yourself, the reflex to explain, to prove, and to react just to find peace. Yet even when you are calm enough to avoid an external explosion, there will be times when a seemingly small slur stings deep inside and lingers for days. Why can a thin sentence carry such immense weight? The answer usually lies not in the sharpness of the speaker, but in the unhealed parts of your own interior, the places where even a light touch is enough to make your entire mind tremble. 4. Armor from self-awareness, seeing the truth behind attacks. Why do some insults slide off your mind like water on glass, while others, even the lightest ones, pierce your chest and ache for days? The answer is more brutal than we think. The destructive power of a slur rarely lies in the speaker's tone or malice. It lies in the echo it awakens within you. When a boss dismisses your idea in a meeting with a comment like, "too amateur," what keeps you awake at night isn't just his attitude. What is truly clawing at your mind is the doubt that has long existed. Perhaps I really am not good enough. The attack is merely the spark. The powder keg was already built within the areas of insecurity you've never faced. Toxic people are often highly sensitive to unnamed insecurities. They don't attack randomly. They throw out provocations like someone tapping on a wall to find the hollow spots. And the moment a word strikes an unhealed wound, your reaction says it all. You frantically explain, you get angry, or you immediately withdraw. In that moment, you have inadvertently handed them a map to the most fragile parts of your inner self. From then on, they no longer need to guess. They know exactly where to touch to make you falter. Therefore, true armor is not forged with sharp comebacks, but through a much harder task, looking directly at yourself and accepting your entirety. What makes a human most vulnerable isn't having flaws. It's carrying them while living in fear of being discovered. When you are still enough to admit that you have shortcomings, that you have limits, and that you are learning and growing every day, you have diffused most of the attacks out there. No one can use a flaw to humiliate you if you no longer view being imperfect as something shameful. From that moment, the slur loses its electricity. It is no longer a knife, it is just a scrap of sound falling at your feet. This is the power of self-awareness. You no longer live in a desperate effort to hide your fragile parts. You stand above them, you understand them, and therefore, you are no longer controlled by them. But even when you see through the mechanics of attacks and silence the echoes of insecurity, most people still cannot free themselves. Not because they lack awareness, but because deep down, they are still holding on to something even more dangerous than fear. The hope that one day, the person who hurts them will suddenly change. 5. Internal decision, abandoning illusions and restricting access. We grow up believing that patience and tolerance can salvage any rift. But in a toxic relationship, hope is often the chain that binds us the longest. Silently waiting for the day they wake up, apologize, or become the kind version of themselves you've always imagined is, in reality, how you prolong your own suffering. You are no longer living with the actual human being standing before you. You are clinging to their imaginary potential. It is the gap between these two images that erodes your soul every day. A longtime friend who constantly mocks your efforts under the guise of feedback, or a partner who vents their frustrations onto your shared goals. If you spend every day analyzing their mood just to decide how to behave, you have inadvertently become a satellite orbiting their instability. To break free, you must do something incredibly difficult. Abandon the fantasy and look directly at reality. Not who they could be, but who they are right now. Stoicism never taught us to beg the sky to change the weather. It teaches us to see the storm clearly and prepare our own shelter. The moment you stop trying to reform someone who has no desire to change, you reclaim a massive reservoir of life force that you've been wasting. As the illusion fades, a cold, sharp principle emerges. Access to you must be restricted. Your warmth, time, attention, and compassion are not public resources. They are the core assets of your inner life. Not everyone deserves to touch the deepest parts of who you are. Therefore, narrowing your interactions, responding only with necessary facts, refusing to step into the emotional ring, and closing the door to your private world is not a punishment. Punishment is when you want them to hurt. Protection is when you no longer allow them to reach the place where they can hurt you. You remain professional. You remain polite. You remain decent. But the right to go any deeper has been revoked. When the emotional oxygen is cut off, chronic manipulators lose interest because the price to provoke you has become too expensive. And then, after all the noise, a strange silence will follow. It is in that silence that you realize a truth greater than any confrontation. Peace does not begin when others stop hurting you. It begins when you stop granting them the right to step inside you. 6. Unshakable fortitude. When you decisively close the door on false hope and stop squandering energy on those who refuse to change, you do not enter isolation. You enter a priceless stillness, a place where a different kind of power begins to form. This silence is not a sign of resignation, nor is it an escape. It is proof that you have left a game where your dignity was once gambled just for a few moments of fake peace. Family dinners that were once suffocating with sarcasm, or meetings that served as hidden battlegrounds for recognition, now appear before you with a clarity that is almost cold. The manipulator may still say the same old things, still try the same old tricks, but they no longer find a place to take root within you. The world doesn't suddenly become kinder. Others don't suddenly wake up and learn how to appreciate you. The only thing that truly changes is that you have become much harder to breach. You no longer shrink yourself to maintain harmony, but you no longer strain yourself to prove your strength. You simply stand firm. And that is true power. Not overpowering others with a louder volume or sharper arguments, but maintaining your own rhythm in the midst of chaos. From here, you begin to live by a clear principle. Not everything that touches you deserves a reaction from you. The day you stop explaining your value to those who intentionally refuse to see it, your life begins to quiet down in a very strange, beautiful way. The noise of manipulation and the prods meant to pull you into an emotional whirlpool will gradually fade as they repeatedly strike the wall of your solid self-awareness. The greatest reward of this journey is not how many toxic people you've neutralized. It is that you no longer betray yourself to gain acceptance. You stand among the ruins of old expectations without asking for anyone's validation, without negotiating your self-esteem, and without begging for kindness from places that never knew how to cherish it. As this fortitude takes deep root, you will touch a truth that is both harsh and magnificent. You never needed the whole world to understand you. What you truly needed was to never turn your back on yourself again. The day you truly stop explaining your value is the day your life becomes extraordinarily quiet. This stillness doesn't come because the world has suddenly grown kinder, nor because toxic people have suddenly learned the way of grace. It comes from a truth far simpler and much more powerful. You have become invulnerable. You no longer bring your dignity to the negotiation table, and you no longer rush to react to every meaningless provocation. This is not a temporary tactic. It is a fundamental transformation from within. When you stop bargaining for fairness and root yourself deeply in your self-worth, the entire power game begins to crumble. Toxicity loses its leverage, not because you fought back harder, but because you stood firm enough that every blade fell before it could even touch your mind. If these raw truths have awakened a dormant strength within you, do not let it pass as a fleeting emotion. Leave a subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments as a milestone for your own journey. And if you wish to dive deeper into the art of building an inner world that cannot be manipulated, continue with the video appearing on your screen right now. Stoic Journey will remain here alongside you, sharpening the mind, reforging character, and learning to stand firm amidst the chaos. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you on the next leg of this journey, calmer, sharper, and no longer easily shaken by anyone.